Hi there, you are watching Biology with Inshra, and in this video we're going to be talking about proteins. Now this chapter, known by the name as nutrition, has the number of topics, with the first one being fats, that has been done. The second one being minerals, vitamins, and water. Now that particular topic has also been done. And the third one is our proteins, which we will cover by the end of this video. And the fourth one is carbohydrates, and the last one is about starvation, obesity, and an unequal distribution of food. Now I'll be making the last two videos very soon, and as for the videos that have already been made on nutrition, you may click on the links mentioned down below in the description box to watch them. And do check out my other videos as well, made on topics like enzymes, on the past paper questions, in which I have solved the MCQs live, and I made videos on osmosis, diffusion, active transport, and all those other topics. So Facebook viewers, like, share, and YouTube viewers, subscribe, like, share, okay, and do share this YouTube channel and Facebook page with one another. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so when we talk about proteins, it is quite natural for us to think that proteins are basically your regular old chicken or beef or your lamb, right? This is very stereotypical, and it's not necessary that you get your proteins from your meat. There are many other sources out there that provide you with proteins. I mean, just think about it. Vegetarians don't eat meat, and they need protein. Protein is needed. So what happens? How do they get the protein? They actually get the protein from other food sources. Okay, so first let's start with the basic. Okay, what is your protein made up of? Okay, when I say what your protein is made up of, what I mean is that what elements is it made up of? So fats are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Carbohydrates are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And just like them, proteins are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But here's the twist. This nitrogen has come along. So proteins are not only made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but they're also made up of nitrogen. So remember that, that's important. So I'm gonna highlight it up for you guys so that I can emphasize that this is quite important. Some students don't write nitrogen and you won't get the mark. And some contain sulfur as well. Now there is a thing to be understood here about proteins. Okay. So we have the English language. This is an example. And we have billions and billions of words, okay? Words like however and all that stuff, right? There are many words out there. Words are composed of an individual letter, or you can say an alphabet. So there are around 20 to 22 alphabets, I'm guessing, in the English language. And just like that, proteins, being complex, have their very own version of the different alphabets. And there are about 20 alphabets, to be very exact and precise. There are about 20 alphabets that make up your protein. Now, they're not A's and B's and C's like the English language. Well, they have different names, but you do not need to know them because there are a lot, and that is not required in the syllabus. However, you just need to understand that those versions of the alphabets are called amino acids, okay? Here's that word here, amino acids. There's the alphabets that combine together with the different combination to give rise to your unique protein. And that's why we say there are billions of types of proteins out there due to the 20 different amino acids combining together. So when I say some proteins contain sulfur, what I mean is that out of the 20 amino acids, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 may contain your sulfur, whereas others may not contain sulfur at all. So in your exam, when you're doing past paper questions, it's better to exempt yourself from mentioning about sulfur, because when you write that proteins also contain sulfur, you're basically implying that all of them contain sulfur, and this is wrong. You won't get the mark. If you, however, write that only some contain sulfur, yeah, you may get a mark, but most probably not. They don't require that in the answer according to the mark scheme. So just mention oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, carbon, okay, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. And just some contain sulfur, but exempt from writing it. Okay, so the same thing is mentioned here, just follow the pointer. There are different types of amino acids, or the alphabets, and they all give rise to the various proteins. Amino acids are the simplest form of a protein that can be absorbed by the body. Now here's the detail I'm going to get into. When you eat something, it needs to be broken down so that it can be absorbed by the body. Now what do we mean when we say absorbed? What I mean by that is that it needs to be in a form that can dissolve in water, it means to be soluble, and pass through the cell surface membrane. If it's too big, it won't pass through. Small enough, yes, it can pass through. So your proteins need to be broken down into your amino acids so that they can be absorbed or pass through the cell surface membrane into the cell and be utilized. Okay? Proteins are used for growth and repair of worn out parts of the cell. They also make protoplasm. Now this is actually important, right? Uses of protein. So I'm just gonna put a red here. Okay. Your uses of protein. The first main one is that's something we've been learning since childhood. That proteins are basically used for the growth and repair of worn out parts of the cell. Whenever you get injured or wounded, you get new cells grow on the wound. That happens from the protein you eat, enabling the growth or the repair. And the growth, basically for growing kids, right? Growing children, basically they need protein to grow for the development of their cells and also for repair if they're injured. And they also make protoplasm. Protoplasm are the components of a cell, like your nucleus, cell membrane, cytoplasm, and they're made up of protein. Along with protoplasm, there are many other things in the body that are made up of protein, with the first one being enzymes, and then enzymes that speed up the rate of chemical reactions, antibodies that fight off infections, and hormones. We won't get into much about hormones because that's something to be studied some other day in another video. But just to give an example, insulin is a hormone that controls the sugar level in your blood. So these three, I'll just have a highlighter, just highlight it for you. So enzymes, antibodies, and hormones are the proteins. So they're made up of protein. One very, very important thing to understand here is that all proteins are very vulnerable to rapid and drastic changes in the temperature and pH. Okay, so I've already discussed this in one of the previous videos when I was talking about enzymes. Enzymes, being proteins, are very sensitive. Since it's a protein, it has its own special three-dimensional structure, and if you give it a very high temperature or very low or very high pH, you're basically physically changing the three-dimensional structure of the enzyme. And when you do so, you're basically denaturing it or destroying it. Reduce the temperature, well, you're not destroying it, but you're just making it inactive. And one other thing to know is that your proteins are not living things, so be mindful of that. Let it be your enzyme, antibodies, or hormones. Although they work in the body, they're not living things. Okay, moving on. Now, let's have a bit of a discussion on the structure. This actually gets pretty difficult and complex in many books, and students don't understand it. But I've composed a very simple diagram here by myself for the sake of explaining it in a much more simpler manner. Okay, so let's first understand this. Okay, so let's take a piece of meat or anything containing protein, but I've taken meat since it's very common to think that meat contains protein. So this is your meat, okay, slash protein that contains protein. Now when we get a magnifier or a microscope to look a bit more closely at this, you'll find a long chain, okay? So when you find a long chain here, this long chain is called a polypeptide chain. This is the chain, or in other words, your protein, okay? But it gets deeper. Let's have a deeper look at this. Now we said that your proteins are made up of individual amino acids. Well, these purple dots are the separate amino acids. They could be different from one another, you know, different types, and there could be many of them, like a number of them. So these are your amino acids, okay? The thing that I'm underlining right now, the word. So several amino acids are joined together by a bond. That bond is a peptide bond. So if you look closely here, this is the word that I'm labeling. This bond here, right? The one that I'm shading. This is your peptide bond, the bond holding the amino acids together. So just to summarize, your amino acids are held together by a peptide bond, and this entire chain of amino acids held by a peptide bond is called a polypeptide chain. And what this polypeptide chain does is that this is how, just look at the screen, your polypeptide chain would look like. Several of them combine together like this, or swirl around one another like this in a very complex and in a three-dimensional structure. It's a very complex diagram which is impossible to draw, but this is just a demonstration. Something like this, like threads, and then in this form, in this particular form, it can be found in your meat. So let's have a little summary on this. Proteins, being complex, are composed of long chains that are called polypeptides. The individual amino acids are held by a peptide bond in the polypeptide chains. Basically, in digestion, in the polypeptide chain, right, the peptide bonds are broken down, and when basically, I'll just do a little bit of drawing to explain. You know, these bonds are broken down, okay, from enzymes and stuff. So once they're broken down, your amino acids are freely released. The purple ones, they're released. Okay, so just think of it as like this. They have been released, and once they're released, they're small enough to be absorbed by the body, okay, in that particular form. Okay, so we've successfully studied about proteins, their structure, their uses, and what are they made up of. Now the last part of this topic, proteins, is the test for proteins. So what is that one test done in labs to determine the presence and absence of protein in your food sample? Well, that test is called a Birute test, okay? The one that I'm highlighting here with the purple pen here, the Birute test, which you can see here, is basically a method by which you check for the presence or absence of protein. Okay, fine. So a solution called a Birute solution. So your solution basically maybe you know, a cylinder, measuring cylinder containing a bluish liquid. So that bluish liquid is your Birute solution. Okay. So that Birute solution is added to a sample containing protein. This is what your Birute solution should look like. It's blue in color, just like this. Okay, just have a look at this. This is the Birute solution that is added to your sample that may contain protein. So the Birute solution's composition, what is it made up of? It's made up of either sodium hydroxide or copper sulfate. They both are alkaline, so the Birute solution is alkaline. Okay. So if you want, you don't need to put the Birute solution. You can just take a bottle of sodium hydroxide and a bottle of copper sulfate and just put them both on the sample. Okay, so in the presence of protein, what happens when you place the Birute solution on something that does contain protein? In that particular case, the sample turns purple or violet. This is what you would expect it to look like, okay? In the presence of protein, your sample looks like this. It looks like this has it turns purple or violet. Okay, just have a look at how it is. This has been done in the lab. Okay, and whenever there's no protein in your test tube, it remains blue. Now the original color of the Birute solution was blue from the start, and when there's no protein, it remains blue. There's no change. No changes occurred, so it is blue. That's why I said that this is the original color of the Birute solution, and also showing that there is no protein present. Okay. No need to go through this. This is something that is not required, but just have a look at the picture and do remember the color of when there is protein and when there is no protein. Okay, everyone, that's it for today. We've successfully completed the topic protein. Facebook viewers, like, share. YouTube viewers, subscribe, like, share, and both of viewers, please do share this with one another and with other people as well. And I hope this was very helpful. Now I'll be making more videos next week. So for now, keep learning and see you next week.